morning. Today is another one of our first fives. And so I've been thinking this week about the things that make us desperate. In other words, what are the things that you were so desperate for that you would do anything for? Have you ever longed for something so badly that you would do anything for it? And one of the things I think is fascinating about many of us is that we long for some of the wrong things and not for some of the right things. But I love this story in Mark chapter 5 because I believe it illustrates what happens when we long for the greatest things. And so here's what we see from Mark chapter 5, beginning with verse 21. When Jesus had again crossed over by boat to the other side of the lake, a large crowd gathered around him while he was by the lake. Then one of the synagogue rulers named Jairus came there. Seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet and pleaded earnestly with him, "My little daughter is dying. Please come and put your hands on her so that she will be healed and live." So Jesus went with him. I'm going to stop for just a second because I don't know if you caught this, but this is a guy from the synagogue, a ruler. Jesus isn't super popular with those in leadership. And yet this guy doesn't care about the perception of others because he cares so much for his daughter that he goes to Jesus humbly with open hands and kneels at his feet and says, "I know I can't do this, but God has done something in you. Will you help me?" The story goes on. A large crowd followed and pressed around him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had. Yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, because she thought, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be healed." Immediately, her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. At once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding around you," his disciple answered, "and yet you ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." While Jesus was still speaking, some men came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue ruler. "Your daughter is dead," they said. "Why bother the teacher anymore?" Ignoring what they said, Jesus told the synagogue ruler, "Don't be afraid, just believe." He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the home of the synagogue ruler, Jesus saw a commotion with people crying and wailing loudly. He went in and said to them, "Why all this commotion and wailing? The child is not dead, but asleep." But they laughed at him. After he put them all out, he took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, get up." Immediately, the girl stood up and walked around. She was 12 years old. At this, they were completely astonished. He gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat. And this story is fascinating. Jesus is interrupted as he comes across the water, and then he gets to the other side, and they say, "Hey, can you heal my daughter?" And yet on his way to do a miracle, he kind of does a miracle. And I don't know what you think about miracles, and I don't really care. I believe God still does them. I think they often happen in terms of medicine and all kinds of other ways in our day. But what I think still happens, and God still works through, is when we seek him with desperation and desire, and we lay everything down. When we seek the right things for the right reasons. And I think what we see in this story is if you'll seek God with all that you are, if you'll seek after Jesus with everything that you have, you won't regret it. In fact, I believe you will find life. Even if you don't find physical healing, you will find life in this moment and life to come. And so I think that the message for you and I today from this scripture is that we are to seek after Jesus above all things. And that's the challenge. Are we seeking Jesus above all things? Because I really do think Jairus and the woman who had the bleeding illness, I do believe they were both seeking with all that they are, Jesus. What if you and I did the same? What might happen in our lives? What might God do that we didn't see coming? And so the challenge for you and I today, let's seek Jesus with all that we are. We'll catch you next time. for another First Five.